Welcome to our special series on the future of transportation this week for Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. Glad you could join us. One of the first signs of a profound economic shift, perhaps even a profound shift in how a sector operates, was in shipping, in the supply chain disruption, and the impact on the terminals that handle incoming and outgoing goods for the world's markets. Vancouver-based GCT terminals and operating facilities here and abroad has had a unique perch on these changes and on the way the business might adapt. So we wanted to talk about the future of this form of transportation, how important it is to our economy and how it might adapt. Its CEO, Doron Grosman, joins me now. Good to have you with us.
Kirk, wonderful to be with you. Thanks for including me. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to get your own appreciation of the events that have that had a big intersection with your company and with the sector, but roll back the clock a little bit to where you were and what you began to apprehend back in March. And I would think even for you, this would be something that preceded that when you started to see the supply chain disrupt out of Asia, for instance.
Yeah. So I was in Vancouver on March 4th and learned that the largest international shipping conference held down in Los Angeles was being canceled. It was supposed to take place that week with thousands of people coming in to dialogue and meet and all of that. And when the conference got canceled, we clearly knew that the things that we were hearing about coming out of China from the December-January timeframe and then Washington in the January-February timeframe had really escalated to a tremendous area of concern. Now, I must say that, well, firstly, let me say a couple of things. The devastation that has occurred around COVID is enormous, and my condolences to the more than 200 families in British Columbia who have lost loved ones. What a tragedy. And then, more recently to see this second wave of cases where here in British Columbia, the cases have risen from about 10 a day to 80 a day. That's obviously of grave concern. Yeah. I would comment, however, that when you look at the Port of Vancouver, July year to date, the volume is only down 5%. Now, that is probably a surprise to many people. So, the disruption in the supply chain is of concern, but it is not that great as people may have imagined. Clearly, in our business, at Global Container Terminals, we're on the front line where let's say the Canadian trade meets tidewater, road, and rail. And our number one priority has been and will continue to be to ensure the health of all our workforce so that we can remain open for business. There has been an economic and operational impact as a result of this pandemic. But I think in the most part at GCT, because of all the innovation and investment and collaboration with supply chain partners that we've put in place, we have remained 100% operational since the beginning of the year without any disruption. Now, I will confess that we do spend a lot of money and time sanitizing the workplace, as we should do, and complying with very stringent hygiene and other sanitation practices. And I'm really proud of the marine terminal operators in Vancouver and the ILWU workforce, our partners, and all the GCT employees who have kept us safe in that regard. So we had pivoted quickly for those that didn't need to work at the terminal to work from home, and that's worked out well for us. And the rest of the folks are fully operational at the terminal, Kirk.
Yeah, but you didn't have the full luxury that some workplaces have in dispersing people to their homes to work remotely. You obviously have to have an awful lot of hands-on at your terminals and in the basic chain of supply, feeding them as well. So what did you institute pretty quickly in terms of practices?
Well, immediately we started to set up sanitization stations, mask availability for people to wear. At that point, it was optional. We put in numerous mechanisms in place so that people would be separated by the 2 meters that is required for those that have to work on the terminal. At the end of every shift, we sanitized the equipment that people were working in. So when the next individual came at the beginning of the following shift, that piece of equipment or that workstation had been fully sanitized.
Mhm.
And for those employees of ours who were privileged enough to work from home, we ensured that they were all at home working there, where they have remained since roughly March 15th, March 18th.
Mm. What lessons have you had almost instantly about how you preserve the confidence that comes with coming to a workplace every day, typically, and feeling like you're in a safe environment? So how did you have to work on that in order to ensure that it stayed that way?
Well, we have the great privilege of having an extraordinary safety program. You can well imagine the nature of the work that people do in moving containers with heavy equipment lends itself to the possibility of injury. And so we have a very detailed, very meticulous, highly disciplined safety process, both at GCT Deltaport and GCT Van Term. And we built on the back of that program and set of processes the sanitization program that we put in place. So it's a mindset, it's discipline, it's constant communication and reminders. So when you show up at the terminal, there's lots of signage about what you're permitted to do and what you're not permitted to do. And obviously we were doing this in great collaboration with the ILWU workforce, as well as the British Columbia Marine Employer Association, the BCMEA. And lots of education, lots of communication, and then, from time to time, a little bit of a stern talk, which is probably no different than would be required in any other environment.
No, but I think what a lot of business leaders have talked about during the pandemic has also been the importance of enlisting those that are really at the front lines with whatever operations exist, in order to get, first of all, their insights, their ideas, in order to build your plan, in order to make sure that there is this confidence in the place. So did it mean different lines of communication for you all of a sudden in some respects?
Most certainly. For every shift that commences at a terminal, there is we call it a lunchbox talk that takes place. And usually it focuses on safety. But for those 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, those toolbox talks commenced with a discussion about sanitization and healthy practices and what the workforce thoughts and ideas were in order to ensure that we were executing on healthy practices. So, for example, on occasion, we drive our ILWU workforce out to the place of work on the terminal. So instead of filling the van with 6 or 10 people, we now had far fewer people in the van, and then shuttling people back and forth.
Right.
In that respect. And then at the workstations where people were located, there was all the hand washing capacity and mask capacity that I referred to earlier, and then obviously signage and suggestion boxes so people could let us know what ideas and thoughts they had that we should be doing differently.
Are we far enough along in the pandemic, Doron, to maybe understand what kinds of permanent changes there would be to things like protocols in shipping and protocols in your management of terminals? Are there things that you're doing now that you think will stick regardless of what the future looks like?
The future is so opaque, but if one can imagine that we get to a point where not only are there 0 deaths a day, but there are, fewer than 10 cases of COVID a day in all of British Columbia, and there are no minor outbreaks, then we can begin relaxing some of these disciplines and processes we've put in place. But I suspect, Kirk, that for a long time, we will retain these sanitization stations where you can wash your hands, put disinfectant on your hand, where masks are available, and the signage will remain there too, just to remind people that even though we have passed through this terrible time, it's not very difficult for it to re-emerge and become a problem.
Yeah, because presumably, again, without full speculation on all this, presumably these types of measures will also help you with your own absenteeism when the typical flu season arrives, for instance, in the fall and the winter.
Most certainly, because like any winter season in Vancouver, there are people catching the flu and not being able to come to work, and we roughly know what number of people that is. And I think by continuing to practice these sanitization and health practices, that will diminish the spread just of the regular flu, let alone any other virus that may exist at that point in time.
So let's maybe move beyond the personnel issues here and move into some of the technology. And I wonder whether your industry is beginning now to understand what forms of technology need to be accelerated in order to achieve, the maximum, the optimum efficiencies in an era where we know that we're going to have other pandemics now.
Yeah, so one of the opportunities and privileges that we have is that we can look backwards and then look forwards. So if you take GCT Deltaport, we invested $300 million in a semi-automated rail car loading facility there that is now fully operational with 7 tracks. That means that within that zone of 7 tracks, for the full length of the track, there is virtually nobody inside the area. There are no people in the cranes. There are no trucks driving in there. Just before the train pulls out or when it arrives, there are 1 or 2 people in there. So by fully electrifying, if you wish, that yard and making it semi-automated, we've reduced the opportunity for people to come into contact with equipment and people to come into contact with one another and avoid the potential spreading of the virus. An example looking backwards. Now, looking forwards, obviously, there are numerous examples I can showcase where technology is being deployed in safety, in sustainability, and in just the general performance of our business. Some of those have a direct impact on reducing COVID, but not all of them necessarily do. So I'll give you an example. In Deltaport, we not only have we electrified a lot of the equipment, and we've put in LED technology, we've put in automatic sensor lighting, and those all remove the opportunity for dangerous human and machine interaction. So without the human-machine interaction, you have a safety improvement, you have a healthcare improvement, and you certainly get some additional productivity. We've also used certain technology that allows us to deal with surge capacity. So for example, right now in August, our volume in August is higher this year than last year. That may come as a surprise to some of our listeners here, but that is true. And as a result of some of the technology that we've put in place, we're able to deal with that surge in a more smooth kind of manner, if you wish. Then there are technologies that don't really benefit us from a safety or health perspective. We joined last year an inter-industry group that promotes the visibility through technology of global blockchain. So between us and our shipping customers and our shipping customers' customers, the beneficial cargo owner, this particular initiative called TradeLens has become quite powerful from a supply chain perspective. So those are some of the examples that we have been focused on, and these technologies, as I said at the outset, have helped us in the past, and those investments from the past and new initiatives that we are deploying now will help us on a go-forward basis.
You have the word global stitched right in to the name of the company, but I think it is perceived as a global industry, even though geographically you might have a British Columbia base, whether it's with you or Vancouver Port Authority. I want to understand now that you also have this international perspective in operating facilities elsewhere than Canada, whether you're starting to see any kind of particular Canadian opportunity or advantage that might be there in terms of this sector.
Yes. I think that a very important thing in regard to this sector in Canada that I would draw the attention to of the business community and British Columbians is the decision for the future to add future container capacity. So what do I mean by that? Global Container Terminal operates 2 terminals in Vancouver, in Delta Port and Vanterm, and our well-respected but very tough competitor, Dubai Ports World, operates 3 container terminals in British Columbia, one up in Prince Rupert, one in the Burrard Inlet at Centerm, and then a smaller one at Fraser Surrey Docks. Now, in 10 years, there is going to be a need, as container volume grows, for additional capacity. And this opportunity is now playing out that Canadians and British Columbians and those in the lower mainland should be paying attention to. We have proposed a project that would come on stream incrementally, roughly in 10 years' time when the demand existed for it, that would expand GCT Delta Port with a 4th berth. Yes. And that berth will be built around our current terminal footprint. And it is our belief that this would be the best decision for the region, Lower Mainland, for British Columbia, and for Canada. And we have that strong belief because we have a history of successful expansion. People may know that we're investing $160 million right now in Vanterm, and within 90 days, look out of your window and you'll see 2 new beautiful ship-to-shore cranes going underneath the Lions Gate Bridge. We've invested all the money I referred to earlier in Delta Port. When we think about this Delta Port Berth 4, we've got the history. We're a Canadian-owned company, so we've got private capital to pay for it. It is our firm belief, and we've got studies that we've already done, that Delta Port Berth 4 will be less disruptive and less risky to the very sensitive ecology that exists in the Roberts Bank area, and also to the very important indigenous crabbing and fishing grounds.
Yeah.
And our expansion is with a lower price tag. So within about 60 days, Kirk, we'll be submitting our official initial project description to the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada and the British Columbia Environmental Assessment Office in this regard. And British Columbians and Canadians will need to pay attention to the opportunity, whether this is really the best project for Canada or an alternative one proposed by the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority is better.
I know that we could get into the weeds about the competing bids and the competing proposals, but I think maybe the question that I'd like to get that's perhaps overarching both of those is what you perceive now to be the political climate in both this country and in the province around expansion and around conditions that will help the industry, whoever the operators are, to optimize their operations.
You know, I don't want to suggest that I'm an expert in the politics of the federal government in Ottawa or the provincial government in Victoria, but I will make a couple of observations. Firstly, the conversations that we have with Transport Canada, with the Minister of Environment, with the Department of Ocean and Fisheries, both in Victoria and Ottawa, are expansive and deep and frequent. And I always find that the ministers and their deputies and their policy makers take the time to listen to us and understand what our thoughts and ideas are. And that's true also of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank that the Premier set up to invest in Canadian infrastructure. Now, clearly, the Canadian government doesn't want public monies crowding out private investment. We're a private company. Our investment monies come from either banks or the cash that we generate. Our owners are Canadians. The Canadian Ontario Teachers Pension Plan or the British Columbia Investment Management Group. And we have the money to invest in a project like this. And I think that, especially in a post-COVID environment where quite naturally there's going to be a real shortage of capital that the federal government and the provincial government has, when projects are presented that don't require money from the taxpayers, and that taxpayer money can be used elsewhere, I would hope, and I have seen, that projects that are funded by the private sector get preference, allowing the infrastructure to be put in place and not to burden the Canadian and British Columbian taxpayer unduly.
Okay, so I didn't get you to really nibble on that one, but I do want to ask a question about supply chains, because what I'm hearing you say today is that perhaps we might have judged as being a little heavier the impact on the industry than actually occurred in the early days of the pandemic in terms of the disruption to the supply chain. We were hearing, of course, back in December and January and February, a lot of ships that weren't sailing from Asia because of this disrupted supply chain. And as you know, it's given rise to a lot of protectionist rhetoric in North America around the necessity to have duplicate supply chains that are closer to home, they're repatriated, that sort of thing. So it's a long-winded way of asking you a question, but in a way, what do you speculate will be our trading pattern here in the next number of years, and will it change on the basis of what's happened in the last 6 months or so?
I don't think that our trading pattern in Canada is going to change dramatically. I think there may be certain kinds of products and medications and things like that may be repatriated for production back in North America and in Canada. So we're not necessarily dependent to the full extent that we have been on foreign governments that are not necessarily as friendly to us as we would like them to be. And that may well include personal protection equipment that is manufactured within Canada and the US for local demand. But I think Canada is a trading nation. It has always been a trading nation. Its proximity to Asia will never change, at least not in a couple of generations' time.
Sure.
And the opportunity to move product from be it China or Japan or Taiwan or North Korea through the Pacific Ocean across the shortest distance into Vancouver in British Columbia is a fact, and I don't think that's going to change much. We are going to remain dependent on those countries, some of them a little more friendly towards us, some maybe a little less, as time goes on. You referenced earlier that we may have anticipated a higher disruption to the supply chain, and we did anticipate. It just never played through. Fewer ships did come, that's factually correct, but those ships were more heavily loaded. And by virtue of fewer ships and more heavily loaded ships, the shipping companies have done quite well. But I will say that the ongoing trade tensions between Canada and the US, maybe more so the US and China, need to get resolved. And a big piece of the resolution of that will hinge upon the political decision made here in the US in early November, when the election for the US president takes place and the Senate takes place. And to forecast what the outcome of that is going to be is impossible at this point. But the uncertainty certainly does remain, and we need to remain nimble to deal with that uncertainty, Kirk.
Yeah. Let's not just speculate on where the U.S. politics are going. But one last issue, and it's something that I've taken time to ask a lot of the chief executives based in this province and elsewhere during this pandemic. I mean, your own management styles have had to probably adapt a bit, but I also wonder how it is that you're personally taking care of yourselves in all of this to make sure that you're operating optimally as well in all of it. So I see you at the home there, and very clearly you're not ensconced in your office. What are you doing for yourself?
Well, thank you for asking that question. It is at the top of my wife's mind very often. I work out both in the early morning before 7 and in the late afternoon before dinner. And I was not working out that much before. I am a privileged guy in that I have space in my home and an outdoor area. So I've been eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the deck and taking 15 minutes or 20 minutes just to decompress, enjoy the beauty of the trees and the grass and the birds and the fresh air, which I would not have been able to do if I was not ensconced in my home. I may have been sitting in a restaurant or grabbing some takeout on Water Street or somewhere in the, around the waterfront area in Vancouver. So those are important things to do. I will confess that I took a week and went away with my wife, not as a vacation week, but a work week to a beautiful area in Massachusetts. And we hiked and I worked, and we biked and I worked, and we ate and I worked, and blended the two together. So it gave me some, let's say, emotional and mental opportunity to be in a different place and not working from the home office every day. And we're fortunate enough in that we're leaving this coming Friday for a beautiful spot in upstate New York to go on vacation without doing any work.
Well, are these practices, do you think, going to stick with you?
We are not going to be permitted, I believe, to cross the Canadian border for quite some time. And in that regard, at least for the next 6 months, I believe that these practices will clearly stick. Some of them will need to be adjusted as we go through the winter. On a longer term basis, I'm less confident that they will stick, because it is critically important in the role that I occupy and other CEOs occupy to be present, not only through Zoom and emails and teleconferences and things like that, but to be eyeball to eyeball with employees, with customers, with stakeholders, with government, with media. And we're all being given this reprieve now. But once travel does pick up again, I was in Vancouver every second week, pretty much for 2.5 years. I suspect that I'll be doing that, and the opportunity to retain some of the healthy practices that I have enjoyed will be more challenging to continue.
Just watch the takeout stuff, that's all, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, it's been a real privilege to talk to you, and I thank you for your time and support today. It's good conversation. Really get an understanding about the impact so far and some of the near-term speculation on where it's going to lead.
Good. Well, wonderful to be with you. Stay healthy, both at home and in the community and in your business. And I look forward to being eyeball to eyeball with you and enjoying a meal, hopefully early next year, Kirk.
Good. Doron Grosman is the CEO of GCT Terminals, and you've been watching our special series this week on the future of transportation. I hope you'll listen to other versions of this, other editions of it. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief of Business in Vancouver. Thank you so much for your time.